Okay, now we only have two story quests left with characters that I don't give two shits about, also because I don't know who the hell they are, but let's go ahead and get it over with.
Once upon a time, in a land far away, there was a lone swordsman famed for his two-sword style. He
What?
became a legend after fighting over 10,000 battles. And the mere sound of his name struck fear into the hearts of his enemies.
I'm sorry, but there is only so much Todd Habercorn that I can listen to in one game. Holy shit.
Whenever he appeared in town, ne'er-do-wells were said to scramble away like spiders, fleeing the light. Prospective fighters began to seek out the swordsman, and thus he gained quite the following of disciples. Amongst them, some were so strong they could crush warships with a single strike. One could do worse when choosing students of the martial arts. So the master abandoned the battlefield for the mountains, where he could train his
Unless I'm
beloved
wrong, but I think it's
disciples
him.
in peace. There was one disciple who quickly stood leagues above the rest. It took her only a matter of days to master the most complicated techniques. She grew at an astonishing rate into one of the most powerful fighters the master had ever seen. But more impressive than her wits or her aptitude was the strength of her conviction. Every day the top disciple begged for harder training, and the master was willing to reward her passion with the very depths of his knowledge. And that's why... Why? Oh, skies help me. That's why when the master found out his top disciple had betrayed him, he was filled with anguish. She went rogue, forcing some of the other disciples to do her bidding. Eventually, the master caught up with her, and they fought a deadly battle. When the dust settled, the top disciple's sword arm hung limp and unusable. It was a bittersweet victory, as the master knew what must come next. He readied his blade, preparing to release her to the afterlife. But he couldn't force himself to make the cut. Not after all he had poured into this girl. Not after failing her so. Thus, he laid down his weapon and promised to live his remaining days in penance and regret. Oh, how our good intentions cloud even the most prescient vision. Having thrown away his name, his blade, and his path, he set out back into the world. But this time, swearing no one would suffer from his tutelage again. Breakfast time, salmon for supper, and naps in between. Yep, it suited him just fine. It was the quiet, healing life of a hermit. Sometimes, when he needed supplies, he would go down to the village and train the locals in a little sword work. That made his coin purse jingle again. But this peace wasn't to last for the swordsman. He discovered his top disciple was back to her wicked ways, and, sword in hand, he vowed to conclude her story for good. This was his true purpose for traveling with the crew, though the young captain never suspected the little Harvan fisherman was harboring such a dark secret. The former disciple's latest victim had been a simple man from a remote mountain area, cut down, somehow without the use of her sword. A real shame that one more innocent life lost before its time. The swordsman asked the crew to make haste to the village. When he saw the murdered man's corpse, such was the carnage that he could barely keep from averting his eyes. It was his weakness, his cowardice, that cost this poor man's life. But this time, instead of wallowing in pity, he would don his white uniform of old and atone. He called it his burial garb, and it represented his fearlessness on the battlefield. If he were dressed to meet death face to face, what more could his foes do to intimidate him? Of course, his crewmates tried to reason with him, concerned he might throw his life away to make up for the wrongdoing of another. But the Swordmaster was determined. He had vowed to stop his former disciple, whatever risk that entailed. So, when finally the moment of reckoning had come, the Master gripped his blade, ready to strike down his favored pupil. Before he could do the deed, however, his resolve crumbled. His emotions were too strong, dulling his senses and causing him to lose the match. The Master's former youngest disciple, with his two newest pupils watching from the sidelines, rushed to aid him. Ironically, it was the youngest disciple who struck down the fiend in place of the Master. The swordsman was lost in grief, but his newfound champion told him this was for the best. After all, such an old life deserved the rest of its days to be spent in peace. After joining up with the crew, I've had some helter-skelter days, let me tell you. So when we arrived in Zega Grande, I knew I needed to get myself some fishing done. Reset the old noggin. Found a nice quiet pond and dropped my line. Bless me taters. Must have been hours past with no bite. Finally, I decided to pull up my rod and check if the bait was still hardy. But there weren't no baits, no hook, and no fish. Only a lonely little bobber remained on the line. Right, well, what about me traps? I was halfway through the search when I realized, blast, I left them in the lodge. What a day, what a day. But it was too late in the noon to go back for them, and I had other business to attend to, like getting back to the pond and staring out at the clear water. In that moment of stillness, the fishies swam out of their hiding spots. There were big ones and little ones, and the whole school of them reminded me of my teaching days. Each of my disciples was unique in their own right. Had me some slow learners and some fast ones, some goody two-shoes and some real punks. I learned me some good lessons from those kids. My top student, Grace, never wavered in her particular sense of justice, and her commitment to her training was ironclad. What a waste. Rains, my youngest pupil, lost his way for decades after leaving my tutelage, but he ended up killing Grace in my stead. He was selfless, thinking only of his master. They say the master extracts potential from the student, but I fear I've ruined more young lives than I've helped. Makes a fisherman wonder how they all would have turned out had he just kept well enough to himself. I turned Grace into a monster. Not a day goes by I don't regret honing her skills. Unfortunately, she had the gift and the gumption to go far, and I exhausted all my knowledge on her. If only I had focused more on the why of my teachings rather than the what. Huh? I swore I felt a nibble at my rod, but when I pulled it up, there was nothing to be found. That's when I remembered I still hadn't hooked or baited the line. That was odd. I was getting antsy. Maybe it was because I forgot the traps, but I couldn't relax just sitting there anymore. I decided to pack up and head back into town. You see, the mind is like a creek. You want to keep it healthy. You gotta keep the waters from stagnating. But sharing them too much, and you risk losing all your fish. I decided to head to Sierra's shack and replace some fishing gear, hopefully restoring my brain pond in the process. But just as I was dipping my toes into the placid waters of the lures and bait, I heard a rustle from behind. And to my surprise, they were my crewmates, picking up a package. Said they were bored at the inn and asked if they could come fishing with me. Youngsters so bored they wanted to go fishing? First time for everything, huh? While I was hammering out the finer points of fly casting with the captain, Sierra Carte piped up, said she'd come across a pretty tasty rumor.
Yep, apparently there's a legendary fisherman in this skydom that people have started calling the Fisher God.
I'd heard rumors like this one before, and they always stank like fish guts. Catching 10 fish with one cast, netting a whole consortium of crabs. By yourself? Gah! If I had a fin for every story like this, I'd be a pretty scary sea monster by now. Then again, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't intrigued. There's a scale of truth to every story, so there must be a reason they call this person the Fisher God. Guess you might say my interest was piqued. Because if this fella were half as good as me, he'd make a mighty fine rival. And maybe that's just what I needed.
I'm ready to fight!
After some consideration, I decided I would test my mettle against this so-called Fisher God. The captain, Lyria, and Varen wanted to help out too. I asked around town where I might find such a rival, but he proved to be as mythical as his title suggested. Rumor had it that he appeared at ponds, peaks, and valleys. The others garnered about the same information, which only further piqued my interest. No matter who we asked, we could not catch the proverbial tail of the Fisher God. All we learned was that he was skilled, able to catch 10 fish with one cast, yada yada, and any new species he caught would be named after him, meaning there were lots of little demigods swimming around now. With only tales of his escapades to feed us, and no concrete info, we grew weary. You can't sustain a healthy rivalry on rumor, after all. We needed to change our approach and re-examine the facts. All of the stories were about places he visited, meaning he'd never been spotted in town. With that in mind, we enlisted Sierra Carte to speed up the investigation. Sure enough, after a few days' time, she gave us a map dotted like it had the chickenpox. There were stamps on ponds and lakes, glaciers and volcanoes, and even a poisonous swamp. All of them locations where he'd been spotted. So the old fart got around, did he? Good to know he had an adventurous streak. After staring at the map for a while, I realized there was one place conspicuously without a stamp. It was the most dangerous island of all, known for the molten lava covering its surface. Going off my hunch, Sierra Carte did a little more digging around, and we learned a man with a fishing rod chartered a ship there a few days ago. The chase was on. Move it or lose it, folks. Now, where's this Fisher God?
Ah! We're monsters!
That's no good. Did we wake the spirit to this land? Feel perky as a pickle.
The pink petals.
Are you really gonna fish in a dangerous place like this?
Of course! We're not dealing with your average angler here. This is a fisher god we're after. Now, he should have left supplies or tracks or something. Slash it dry seal for him.
Okay, but we better be careful while we search. Ah! Don't scare me like that!
Now, if I were a fisher god, this is probably the bait I'd use. Just a hunch, though. Careful now! Those spirits look angry!
Those are the ones that explode if you
That's
eat them
the
too
sauce.
hard.
Mercy me!
Winter's
One
Reign.
more! Oh, fiddlestick! Woohoo! Little dizzy! Bet you can't hit me!
Don't get carried away. Thanks.
Panacea!
We've come pretty far. This heat is killing me.
Just a matter of time before we're there. Now hop to it. Huh? Looks like somebody came through here, and they were collecting magma worms.
Whoa! I see somebody! Maybe it's the Fisher God!
Very well could be. Give him a hello and see what's up.
Hey there! Can we talk a minute? Hey, mister! What the heck are you doing out here?
What's it look like? I'm fishing.
What fish? You might catch a few rocks if anything at all.
We fish, therefore they are. It's the deepest waters what hide the greatest prizes.
The proverb left his lips like a right prophet. This had to be our fisher god.
I still don't get how fish could survive in lava.
And that's your problem.
His answer was cryptic, but it had its own logic. The captain, Lyria, and Vern cocked their heads to the side in confusion. Clear water or molten rock? Cast the rod and catch the fish.
Truer words were never spoken, friend.
Guess I've learned me something over the years. Those unblinking eyes, that unrelenting hunger for the catch. His tools were top-notch. More importantly, however, he had the aura of a man born to hunt the seas. But I didn't come to admire him. May we presume you are the fisher god?
And to what do I owe the accusation?
What do you say to a little fish-off betwixt the two of us?
Ah, now there's a song to my ears. It would be my honor.
And thus, the net was cast.
Is your stomach growling?
Come to view the requests?
We fish, therefore they are. It was a profound statement. Hang your line thinking you won't catch anything, and you won't notice even the heftiest bite. Determination was the most essential tool in the old tackle box. But then again, we were sat up next to a lava lake, and I would need more than simple chutzpah to pull a fish out of there. Luckily, I had me secret weapons.
Someone came prepared.
Beautiful, ain't they? I strung a special hook, carved from a flameworm's tooth, to a special line, spun from its mane. Been looking forward to the day I can bust out these bad boys.
Whoa! You're really going to do this?
The captain, Vern, and Lyria were stunned as I cast my rod into the lava.
Just what the heck are you old-timers expecting to catch?
Vern's voice was filled with confusion, but wasn't a moment longer when we made a believer out of him. Oh, a bite!
Me too!
The Fisher God and I started pulling up catch after catch. It seemed like we both brought determination to spare. But the fish living inside the lava weren't no slouches neither. They were covered in armor like scales, and when we pulled them ashore, their flopping sent liquid death flying in every direction. Was kind of funny. So there we were, equally matched, neither side willing to back down. As our piles of molten fish gradually turned to hills, the captain, Lyria, and Vern were dumbstruck. Soon enough, our swordbacks told us it was time for a gentleman's break, and we decided to tally our scores. We counted each fish as we threw them back into the lava. Their physiology meant they couldn't be cooked. Don't want no sulfur in my sushi anyway. But they sprang back alive as soon as they were returned to their familiar warmth.
Should've known you'd be a shark on the rod.
Just trying to keep up. It was a rare thing to meet your match. The smiles on our faces were proof of that. Vern flew up to us.
Is this really all this quest is about going to get some fish?
I wonder who would come out on top.
I knew
Fisher
these
God
last
and
two
I
weren't going to be
locked
interesting.
eyes. We could feel the sparks flying.
Sounds like the gauntlet's been thrown.
Agreed. We've had enough of a warm-up.
Then you won't mind if we up the ante, huh?
He told us about a few local legendary fish that had eluded capture for years. Reminded me of the noble bonito from good old Fanta Grande. We agreed the winner would be the first to trap one of them fabled guppies. The prospect sent lightning through me body. The old spark was coming back. Now I just had to track me down a living, swimming myth. Couldn't be that many lakes harboring legends, right? Turns out there were few eyewitness accounts of such fish. Guess they didn't like flashing their scales as much as the Fisher God. But I knew they had to exist. Why would he make up the challenge? So back to Sierra we went. She kindly asked the Fishermen's Guild and scholars to lend their assistance. They told us of a potential target. A beautiful fish, said to have the loveliest iridescent scales in the world. But it had never been caught, so it had yet to receive a proper name within academia. As if to tempt me more, we learned the locals called it the jewel fin. Catching it would be like grabbing a cloud, but the more I heard, the more I needed it. Surely it was a fool's errand. Too bad I was beside myself with determination. A being that existed somewhere between reality and rumor, I had to catch me some of that. Thus, in the coming days, whenever I found a semi-reliable lead, I would fly to the spot and cast my line. Went to salt lakes where a sip of the water would dry you to the bone. Wandered around underground streams where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, and then every place in between. The captain, Lyria, and Vern accompanied me on my flights of fancy, but they grew tired of the pace. I wouldn't force them. I had planned to make the trip alone anyhow. All I wanted to do was find the unfindable, to catch the uncatchable. It was a good sign, honestly. They say anticipation exists right before accomplishment. Take a new sword technique. You only perfect it the day before a duel. A consequence of pre-battle nerves sending your noggin into overdrive. And this fish-off was a duel to the death for me and the Fisher God. It would be the accomplishment of the century for any who lived by the rod. I was having the time of my life. But I knew I didn't have forever. We were in this skydom for a reason, and that mission had to take precedence. I decided my next search would be the last. It brought me to a labyrinthine jungle, which had claimed many adventurers in the past. I heard that somewhere inside was a spring turned monster den. One look at its bewitching twinkle would be enough to drive a man mad, and he'd throw himself into the pool to be swallowed. Relying on those exaggerated claims for guidance, I braved the forested depths to discover not a glorious spring, but a regular old bog. Ugh. Ain't no legendary fish ever lived in a place like that. But still, I cast my rod, and Vern and the captain waited with bated breath as they watched me bobber-a-bobbin'. The swamp remained quiet. I was neither overcome with anticipation nor bored from inaction. I was part of the stillness, and my rod was my connection to it. I was one with nature and leap and liver fish a bite. I tugged the fish to the surface and began to tear up as the most perfect, lustrous twinkle broke the murky waters. Turns out none of the scholars' descriptions were quite right. But this was it. This was the jewel fin of legend. How's this for a catch? I proudly displayed the jewel fin before the fisher god. Its scales glistened in iridescent waves, unreal in their beauty. Its fins, ethereal and transparent, waved as if kissed by a breeze. That old coot was flabbergasted.
Slap my behind! Where in the seven skies did you find this?
That was a delicious reaction. But of course, the fisher god was a fisherman of taste, and he had a rebuttal prepared. It was a large fish, obsidian in color, whose scales seemed to drink the light like a void. Its dorsal was strong and stiff, as if to mark it as a sea king.
Whoa! 2 legendary fish? Isn't that nuts?
Both of our catches fit the criteria of the competition. It was gonna be too hard to call. Guess we couldn't complain, though. Not every day we got to see such rare specimens. Still, something had to be done. So we turned to Lyria, Vern, and the captain.
I think both are amazing. I've never seen such pretty fish. Can't we just say you're both incredible and be done with it?
Guess 2 legendary fish don't make a champion, especially when we were both set on wearing the crown. Nope, it didn't sit right with me. Our rivalry pushed the craft of fishing forward, hadn't it? There was fire in our guts, and we deserved to name a proper victor. Vern saw the determination plain on our faces.
You guys aren't gonna let this go, are you? Game's back on, then.
Lyria pondered for a moment and made a suggestion.
How about whoever fishes up the most happiness? That could be interesting.
A genius suggestion. This island was under Avia's control, terrifying the population. It would be a saintly move to give them cheer with a side of full bellies. It was settled. We would go with Lyria's suggestion. He who could bring the most happiness to the island would take it. After a nod to one another, the fisher god and I set out to do some real fishing. So, who's ready to shove off? Hope we come across a good fishing spot.
In this blizzard, how are you gonna even see your rod?
Ancient technique. here running water. You think this here hole has a river at the bottom? We're just looking to fish. But if you want to be a sushi platter, step right up. Just my luck. Hey.
Want a treat?
Enough of you!
Just testing you, lad.
Get behind my
Can fish even live in weather this cold?
The colder the weather, the fatter the fish. Make some good barbecue.
Ooh, that's neat. You learn something cool every day.
Busy.
You don't scare
Swim
us.
to my
Over here, you cunt!
Right behind you. Our teamwork is not to be trifled with. And yet there are still greater
You're not
heights to
wrong.
climb.
I don't think you can take much
Mighty
more.
kind of you.
There's nothing to fear.
Ooh, that spot looks swell. This place is perfect. Let's get started.
Holy crap! Looks like the monsters caught our scent.
Curse their timing. Well, clean them up right quick.
There is but power. Cross it smooth.
Empty big. Where you looking?
To victory!
Hook 'em fast.
We cannot escape fate. Everyone has such great technique,
Bet you
right?
can't
We
beat
did
me.
well.
Leave it to me.
You said it. Yeah.
That takes care of that.
I wouldn't be so sure. Looks like we got a big fella on our hands next.
For real? We don't have time for this.
Yep. And judging by its bad attitude, I don't think it's gonna let us leave without a fight.
It's right there!
Now, this here's a sight for sore eyes. Sorry, bub, but you're between us and our fishing spot. No running for me! Over here, you dunce!
It's our
Pass
turn!
the bug! You got it!
You work magic with a sword.
Not every day a half-living ghost calls you
Stay
magic.
vigilant.
You're right. We've been lost to anger.
It's taken all that damage, but that hasn't slowed it down a bit. Better try to finish it off before we get exhausted. Try to keep on.
Away.
Pass away. No way.
Caught us a big one. Where are you looking? They'll never see it coming.
Follow through.
You got it. That was a good one. Got my casting arm all warmed up. Oh, I hope we didn't scare off the fish. Ha! Still in my golden years. Results day had arrived. Residents of Seed Hollow were gathering, waiting to see what bounty we could share.
Feast your eyes. I have caught the elusive brave scale.
The fisher god took to the podium. The largest fish in this skydom strung up behind him. The crowd was wowed by the sheer scale of the thing, and I was no exception. Should have known he'd come out with rod blazing. But I, on the other fin, took a different approach. Behold! All these humble shellmen who make their home in these very rivers. I sure wasn't gonna win through size, but maybe superior numbers would do the trick. Next, the fisher god and I began to fillet our catches, sharing sushi, soup, and ceviche of all sorts with the crowd.
The Brave Beam is delicious. And how do you beat that impact?
The shellman is just as good.
good. It's so fresh and it's been served at the optimal temperature. Absolutely perfect.
Everywhere we looked, there were people enjoying our efforts. Even the crew were getting their fill while they could. But since it was a competition, next up was evaluations. Members of the crowd were to vote on whose catch made them feel better, both in flavor and in general happiness. One after the other, the votes piled up for the Fisher God. It was starting to look hopeless. But there was a special reason I chose to serve the Shellman. I wasn't panicking just yet.
Shall we call it there, friend?
I gotta hand it to you, Fisher God. You serve some delicious fish. But let's see how it plays out. While I was talking, a cute little scamp, snot running down his nose and everything, cast a vote for me.
You didn't want to vote for the big fish, sweetie?
It was too big and scary. I like the small fishies.
The Fisher God's breath caught for a moment, and I knew he understood my plan.
Fresh sandwiches. Come to the soup and decide.
Come to view the requests?
The Fisher God bowed his head and admitted I was the winner. But before I could humbly accept his withdrawal, Vern voiced honest confusion.
Looking at the votes, you're the clear winner, aren't you?
Not at all. Without this master of the rod opposite me, these results wouldn't have been possible.
He spoke from the heart. Moved me a bit to hear that he understood me through and through.
It's ordinary fish, ones we consume daily, that bring us health and happiness. Delicacies shine because they're a rare treat, but well-being is built on something more than rarity. Hearing that youngster speak, I understood what Yodarha was trying to tell me. The fact I couldn't surmise for myself is proof of my hubris.
He continued.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, a child's smile will do more for a village's well-being than all the legendary fish in the sea. That's what I should have been aiming for.
A smirk sat on his lips as he turned to me.
Congratulations, Yodarha. Even had I won this competition, I concede in our fish-off. You are the rightful victor. I've learned much from our duel. I thank you from the depths of my heart.
Never in my days had I met a more worthy gentleman. And you, good sir, helped this old minnow rediscover his love of the sport. After the voting had concluded, the townsfolk were still savoring our dishes. Both Brave Bream and Shalman were a hit. The satisfied smiles of the people were evidence of this. But as all good things must come to an end, so too did the feast. Despite the mountain of fish we started with, not a single fillet was left. I turned to the Fisher God, a gleam in my eye. And though he just admitted defeat, his eye held the same twinkle. You want a race to see who can get this place spick and span quicker? We were no longer rivals. We were brothers of the rod. And this little competition would tide us over till our next real match. We were shopping at Sierro's when the merchant herself popped up from behind the counter. Apparently she'd been waiting on us, ready to share the latest seaworthy gossip.
A certain rumor swam earlier this month. You see, people are saying there are 2 Fisher Gods working this skydom. Would you know anything about that?
Vern and Lyria gasped in surprise before turning to give me a curious look. You know, I never meant to keep making a name for myself, but old habits die hard, don't they? Sounds like quite the handsome fella. Can't wait to meet him.
Cause every